And that is why I think this story still matters. Because it reminds us that while we do not choose the world we inherit, we do participate in the world we leave behind. And maybe becoming fully human means learning again and again to choose the work of If it's your first time around this neck of the woods, welcome. I am truly glad you're here. Now, this is a space where we explore the deep roots of the ideas that quietly shape our lives. The ideas that shape how we understand ourselves, how we relate to one another, and how we make meaning in our lives. Especially so in those seasons when we find ourselves asking again what it means to be human. Over the years, I've come across many creation stories that have stayed with me, more than I could ever fit in one series, if I'm honest with you. Choosing only 5 has been difficult, but these are 5 that I find myself returning to again and again. Not because they are the only stories worth telling, that's far from it, but because each one preserves something of humanity's oldest reflections on life, on belonging, suffering, meaning, basically questions about what it means to be human. And so today we come to the second story in this little series. Now, if you missed our first conversation on the Mesopotamian creation narrative and the wonderful world of the Anunnaki, don't panic. I got you. I'll leave a link in the description below. Today, we explore the traditions of the Haudenosaunee, sometimes referred to historically as the Iroquois Confederacy. Though that term, Iroquois, carries a complicated history and is viewed by some as problematic because of its colonial origins. Haudenosaunee, meaning people of the Longhouse, is the name the Confederacy uses to identify itself. Now, the story I'm sharing today is only a brief retelling of a much richer living tradition preserved within Haudenosaunee communities. My purpose is not to tell the whole story, but simply to listen for what it might reveal about what it means to be human. And with that in mind, let me tell you the story. Long before there was earth beneath our feet, before forests and rivers and mountains, there was Skyworld. Skyworld was beautiful. It was abundant. Among its inhabitants lived a young woman who in some stories is called Mature Blossoms. Near the center of Skyworld stood a great tree. It was no ordinary tree. It connected realms. It stood as a source of life and mystery. Now, as with many living traditions, there are different tellings. In some versions, Mature Blossoms was married to the chief of Skyworld and had become pregnant. But tension had arisen. Some stories suggest the chief suspected another relationship. Others simply speak of a disturbance within him, troubled by dreams or perhaps by something restless in his own soul. The chief called upon others to discern what should be done. And it was resolved that the great tree will be uprooted. When the tree was uprooted, a great opening was left in its place, connecting Skyworld and the deep, dark, watery world below. Now, what happened next is remembered in different ways. One version says the chief asked Mature Blossoms to look down into the darkness below, and as she peered into the opening, he pushed her. Reaching out in desperation, she grasped at the soil of Skyworld and gathered some of the sacred seeds that had fallen from the uprooted tree. Other tellings say she volunteered to descend, carrying with her those same gifts of earth and seed. Still others say that as she leaned over, curious to see what lay beneath, she simply lost her footing. But however the story is told, falling she did. And below in the dark watery world, the animals looked upward and saw a woman descending from the heavens. Immediately, a council was called. How shall we help her? The birds rose together and spread their wings beneath her, slowing her descent and carrying her gently. And because there was no land upon which she could stand, they placed her upon the back of a great turtle. Now, in one telling, Mature Blossom spread the earth she had carried from Skyworld. But in most versions, she asked the animals for help. They had committed themselves to her well-being after all. And so Beaver dove beneath the waters in search of earth. He was gone a long while. And then they saw him floating lifeless upon the surface. He had failed. Then Otter went down, and he too gave his life. One after another, the animals tried, and one after another, they failed. Until finally, Muskrat, small and easily overlooked, slipped beneath the waters. He remained gone so long that many feared the worst. And then, at last he surfaced, barely alive, but held within his tiny paw was a small bit of earth. So, upon the shell of the great turtle, the earth was placed, and slowly, I might even say mysteriously, the land began to grow. Mature Blossoms danced upon the new earth, and with gratitude she scattered the sacred seeds she had carried from Skyworld. Plants emerged, trees stretched upward, life flourished. In time, Mature Blossoms gave birth to a daughter who grew swiftly into womanhood. She eventually had a sexual relationship with Gaha, the great wind, and conceived twins. One became known as Good Mind, the other Bad Mind. In some traditions, they are known as right hand and left hand. And through their differing visions, the twins continued the work of creation. Good Mind sought harmony. He made rivers that flowed straight and clear. He planted forests in order. He fashioned creatures that would nourish and sustain life. He desired a world where life could flourish. But Bad Mind delighted in complication. Where Good Mind made rivers straight, Bad Mind caused them to bend and wander. Where Good Mind planted smooth paths, Bad Mind raised mountains and cliffs. Where Good Mind made creatures that were gentle and useful, Bad Mind introduced those that bite, sting, and bring danger. Where good mind desired abundance, bad mind ensured that struggle will never be absent. And so the world came to bear both beauty and hardship, abundance and difficulty, joy and sorrow. And finally, from the earth itself, good mind fashioned human beings. He taught them how to live upon the land, how to give thanks, how to care for creation, and how to continue the work first begun by their grandmother, mature blossoms. And that is how the story finally arrived at us. Now, here are a couple of things that stand out in this story. First and foremost, creation is collaborative work. Very little, if anything at all, happens in isolation. The world comes into being through relationships, through cooperation, through gifts freely offered. Existence itself is relational, not competitive, not individualistic, relational. Notice too that creation here is not about conquering the earth. The animals are not obstacles to overcome. They are relatives, they are partners, they are participants. Human beings arrive into a world that already exists as a community. We do not stand above creation. We are born into it and we belong within it. This is why many indigenous traditions speak not merely of nature but of kinship. Perhaps this is what the story is teaching. Not that we stand above creation, but that we belong within it. Not masters, but participants. Not isolated individuals, but members of a living web of relationships. And perhaps wisdom begins right there, when gratitude replaces entitlement and reciprocity replaces exploitation. Look, it's clear to see that the great ancestors of the Haudenosaunee were wrestling with questions that still remain with us today. Questions like, what do we owe one another? How should we live with the earth? What happens when we forget that we belong to a larger community of life? Perhaps nowhere is the wisdom of this story more needed than in our own time, because we live in an age that prizes independence. We speak constantly about self-sufficiency, about building our own lives, about making our own way, and yet the truth remains stubborn. None of us brought ourselves into being. And even now, every breath we take depends upon countless gifts. Waters we did not create, land we did not make, and generations before us who made our lives possible. Now, this brings us to what I can only describe as the invitation hidden within the story. The story never suggests that good mind and bad mind are merely characters from a distant age. Their works remain before us. Every day, we inherit a world of both harmony and disorder, generosity and selfishness, beauty and suffering. And every day, through 1,000 ordinary decisions, we are invited to participate in one work or the other. The big question is, will we become good mind people? People who heal rather than wound, who cultivate rather than destroy, who bring gratitude where resentment might flourish, who strengthen relationships, communities, and the fragile web of life itself? Or will we become bad mind people, adding more division, more indifference, more bitterness, and more chaos to a world that already bears enough wounds? And that is why I think this story still matters, because it reminds us that while we do not choose the world we inherit, we do participate in the world we leave behind. And maybe becoming fully human means learning again and again to choose the work of good mind. Now, I should mention that this reflection was first shared on Patreon before making its way here. In fact, all reflections appear there first before they make their way here. Patreon is also the home of our extended reflections. So if you'd like to sit with these ideas a little longer, or if you simply like to support the work we do here, that's the place to be. And if you're wondering how to get there, don't panic. I've got you covered. I'll leave the link in the description below. Now, like I've said time and time again, these stories are far more than stories about beginnings. They are humanity's earliest reflections on what it means to exist, what it means to belong, and what it means to be human. These stories remain relevant in the world we live in today. They still matter. Next, it is the third story in this series, and trust me, you don't want to miss this one. But until then, thank you for being here, because learning what it means to be human together truly, truly matters.